Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My JavaScript Story. This week, we're talking to Isaac Schlueter. Now, we've had Isaac on before, and I'm just going to kind of do the intro because I like the guy. He used to be, I just found out, the CEO of NPM. I think last time we talked, you were the CEO of NPM.
That's right.
You co-founded it, and I think we did an episode on JavaScript Jabber when you went corporate, so to speak. You set up NPM Inc. and things like that. Just a lot of interesting things. You created NPM, if I remember right. You maintained Node for a while. I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole bunch of awesome stuff you've done. So,
I think those are probably the two ones that people would know about. I've just kind of been a open source busybody for 10, 15 years now. Pretty active in the JavaScript ecosystem and community. Made a package manager that a lot of people still use. And a bunch of other kind of hobby projects.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
It's kind of interesting. The only coding I do now is it's all on my own time, nights and weekends, hobby stuff.
Well, I know how that goes. I spend all week podcasting, and then it's like, oh, I really wanted to code something, and so I'll go find something to hack on. Yep, and I've actually hired somebody to do my coding for me, which is
really?
It's both exciting and disappointing.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the end, man. Watch out.
Yeah. So Anyway, let's dive in and talk about your journey here. What's interesting is that we did an episode where we talked about how you got into code and JavaScript, and we talked a bunch about how you created NPM and what it was like maintaining Node and all of that stuff. People can go check that out. That's episode 4 of My JavaScript Story. And we've had you on over the years too to talk about different aspects of NPM and Node. I'm just kind of curious, over the last 2 years, since we did the My JavaScript Story, I guess besides the changeover in role at NPM, are there other major things that have changed in your life or your journey?
Gosh, that's a big question. Well, I think that's sort of the ecosystem and the landscape of JavaScript has continued to grow and develop, and that's been kind of interesting and exciting. In terms of my personal journey and JavaScript story, biggest thing is probably the shift from being CEO to Chief Product Officer. When I was CEO, I was actually focused more on product than anything else. But when you're running a company, there's so many demands on your time and attention. It's really hard to kind of focus on any one thing. It definitely takes a special sort of person to be able to juggle all that. And so the decision to hire a CEO is really around how do I actually just do what I'm good at and not all these other things that I keep dropping on the floor. And I'm probably too hard on myself, right? The company survived. We're still around, so I did something right. So as the company grows, it's been really exciting to kind of watch this project and team sort of grow and mature. I've hired a VP of product as well to kind of help operationalize this, the product function at the company. So again, so I can kind of focus on more of the bigger picture, like how is NPM going to change the landscape again the next time. Yeah, I mean, I guess the other probably pretty big thing that changed in my life and my relationship with open source and with JavaScript is my kid keeps getting older and bigger.
They do that.
Yeah, they do. So yeah, I have a 3-year-old now, so she's very fun to hang out with, and also very draining and demanding.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I have a 3-year-old. She's my youngest, though. So,
so you were already a pro by the time she showed up.
Yeah, something like that, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I want to talk a little bit more about the transition away from being the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people think that being the CEO is sort of, I guess they don't think of it as a job so much as just, hey, this person's in charge, and you get to be in charge, and that's kind of the deal. So do you want to talk a little bit about that decision? Like, how do you decide, okay, I don't want to be or maybe you did still want to be, but felt like somebody else would be better for the position? And yeah, how that all came about.
Well, so I mean, I'm not saying this to brag, but I genuinely do have zero ego around, being in charge or being the one who makes the decisions,
right.
Whatever. I think that, you use the phrase "get to be in charge." I think the reality is when you're the CEO, you have to be in charge, and
I run my own gig here. I completely understand that.
Right. And as the team grows, right, like, I'm not very connected to I don't want to say I'm not connected to it at all. Like, obviously I have an ego, everybody does, but
right.
The sense of I'm the big head honcho, and I'm in charge, and I get to boss people around, whatever. That doesn't appeal to me nearly as much as just the company being successful and executing on what we can do. And I think really NPM's potential is so great that if we fail on it, if we fail to execute well, if we fail to be successful, the downsides for me are so great, right? I mean, I'm very, very connected to the success of this project and company and community.
Right.
And so, yeah, bring in an expert who knows how to run teams and has run a couple of companies and went to school for this stuff and has some successes under their belt. It's cute to think this engineer and open source, product manager type dude can totally just step into that role and, be everything or whatever.
Right.
That's not realistic in real life. So, it was challenging to find somebody who'd be a good fit, though. And the other thing is even though the CEO role can be passed on to somebody else, the founder hat really never comes off. So I still am, in probably as much or more of a leadership position as I was prior to hiring a CEO and also the rest of the kind of executive leadership team that he's recruit and kind of built out. But what I'm doing now is I'm actually responsible for things that I am much more passionate about and much more knowledgeable in.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I've thought about doing the same thing for a lot of the same reasons. It's just I want somebody to be in charge of the overall making sure everything runs, which I guess is more of a COO, but then also, the vision and the relationships and all that kind of thing. And then I can kind of add my vision in as kind of the founder or owner. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a different kind of thing. And I can go and focus on the things that I enjoy doing that are not necessarily part of a traditional CEO role.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is your role then as Chief Product Officer?
So it's a really vague term, right? It's a really vague job title. And if you go to different companies, they might have different, different responsibilities under that title. Um, Essentially, though, I am sort of where the buck stops in terms of our product function at the company. Um, and and this is also sort of another area where I've totally Peter principled myself, right? I'm promoted way beyond the the scope of my actual expertise, and people management just in general, like I'm not as skilled at, and so that's part of why I decided to bring in a VP of product as well.
Right.
But the in the kind of broadest sense, product is the function at the company that's sort of responsible for making sure that we're building the right things for the right people at the right time in the right order. And where that aligns with my passions and where, what I think I'm actually pretty good at is thinking through how changes to the product that we deliver can actually affect changes within the workflows of JavaScript developers. And kind of how that's going to change the landscape and how we can position ourselves and build things in a way that the community can serve themselves and can push these changes forward in a way that's efficient for us. And that's something I think we did relatively well with NPM itself, right? With the NPM CLI. And the whole kind of system of package management and the way that the NPM registry works and the node module system works. Like, we made it very easy to do certain things that people were trying hard to figure out how to do. And as a result, they did them a lot more, and that kind of changed the whole game, right? Changed the whole landscape of how open source works in JavaScript. So the interesting thing for me is like, all right, so we've solved some problems, and in the process, we've created new ones. How do we solve those problems, and what are the new ones that are going to come out of those new solutions?
Right.
When you have if you reduce friction in a particular part of the workflow, like publishing packages, and what happens is people no longer have as much of a barrier to doing that. So they do it more easily, and they write smaller packages because why not? And before you know it, now they have 1,600 packages in their node modules tree for even like a really basic React website or something. And that imposes its own challenges, especially within enterprises where you can't be quite as freewheeling about what code you use.
Right.
For example, if you have 100 or 1,000 developers building things in this way, and each of their projects have hundreds or thousands of dependencies. If you're a large bank or insurance company or something, and you're using a piece of open source that doesn't have a license, you can be sued for that. Like, you can run into some really serious problems for the company. Now the processes that were built up in the largely in kind of the 80s and 90s mostly were designed around platforms and systems where you'd have a small number of open source dependencies, right? So I'd go to my compliance team and say, I would like to use Apache Tomcat, and they would review it, and they'd look at the license, and they'd look at the team working on it. It kind of has the Apache Foundation seal of approval. So, okay, in 3 to 5 business days, my written request to use Apache Tomcat comes back approved, and I go build my website. But if I submit a request for okay, well, here's 735 different developers scattered around the world who don't know each other, and they've written a sum total of 1,800 packages, and I'm going to use them all to ship our new brochureware website. The compliance team looks at me like I'm crazy, because that doesn't fit with their systems. And so where I think we need to go is to build systems that make it easier for these companies to do this job in a way that serves the needs of these compliance folks, which is real needs, but also lets developers kind of do what they want to do, right? Like, actually build sites and use the latest and greatest tooling to do it. When we look at the NPM user base, we have around 11 million users of NPM on a pretty regular basis. And most of them have jobs, right? Most of them are working.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we had 11 million customers, I would be
Yeah.
I'd be much happier. Probably too busy on my private island to take time to do podcasts. But no, we have a lot of them, and the fact is most of them work at companies, and a lot of them work at very large companies. A lot of them are kind of like suffering through these sorts of like compliance hurdles. And it's a case where, like everybody's doing their best and everybody is acting in good faith and trying to do right by themselves and their teams and their companies. But the systems are just kind of dated at this point. So we're anyway, you asked me what I do as chief product officer. I think about stuff like this. And I'm also still very involved in just kind of how product runs at this company. Although as Susanna, my VP of product, comes up, I'm sure that I'm trying to push as much off my plate as I can as far as all that stuff works.
Right. So where do you see yourself long term then with NPM?
Long term with NPM, I mean, I will probably always be involved to some degree, but I had this completely ludicrous goal when I was maybe 25 that I would figure out how to start a startup someday and retire by the time I was 40. And as it happens, I'm turning 40 this year, and I don't think I'm going to be able to retire this year, but that's really my long-term plan. I want the money without the day job.
Right. You're turning 40. That is so old. Me too.
I know, right?
Yeah. So now I have to ask, are you older than I am? My birthday's in December.
I am older than you are. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how life changes, right? But yeah. So
doctors don't try so hard. It's like that bit, right? They just look at you and they go, "Gosh, wow, that sucks."
Yep. My youngest sister is 16 years younger than I am, and so she looks at me like, yeah, we're just completely different stages of life.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, so you've moved over to Chief Product Officer. And what another thing that I'm curious about, and this is something that people ask me about, and it's something that, as you move up into the kind of the C-level role in whatever company you're working in, how much coding do you actually get to do?
Well, I do a shocking amount of coding, but not at work. It's still one of my favorite hobbies. Right now, I'm getting into the last kind of few bullet points of the last kind of major things I need to do to finish up Node Tap version 13. Pretty excited about it. Yeah, Node Tap. It's a test runner for JavaScript.
Okay.
And I think it's probably like the third or fourth most popular test runner on NPM after Mocha and Jest and some others. But yeah, it's just one of the things I love most about working on a test runner or a test framework. It's similar to what I love about package management. It's like it is such a hostile environment, right? And it's a really challenging UX challenge, because what you have are these people are running these little mini programs against a test runner, and they're designed to fail, right? The whole point is that your tests will occasionally throw an error or a bar for crap out or do the wrong thing. And you have to kind of handle any potential odd behavior in a way that is meaningful and useful without drowning the user out with too much noise, right? Because the flip side of it is you run your tests all the time. So it has to be fast, it has to be terse, it has to kind of get in and get out in the normal case, and then blow up in a really useful way in the failure modes. And that's just, I don't know, I just sort of find that to be a very, very interesting and fun challenge. Otherwise though, in terms of code that's actually used at Tap is used at NPM, but on some of our projects. But I don't really do coding as part of my job anymore. Some of my side projects are used. Some of the projects I've worked on are used particularly still in the CLI. The Node tar implementation that NPM uses is in. I maintain that. A couple of other little things.
Right. That's awesome. I need to just make more time for coding. I don't do it as much as I wish I could. Does it make you sad that code's not part of your job?
No, I mean, I like what it is that my job is now. If anything, one of my goals, whenever I was working in a job that involved a lot of coding, it was always kind of like, I was always trying to figure out how to make it more like open source, and eventually landing at a situation where my job was to work on an open source project, in the Node project. I don't know. I think, if you want a tip for how to make more time for coding, my best advice is just sleep less. Like, go to bed early, but don't actually sleep. No, I mean, it's a very different experience, right? It's more like tending a garden and less like farming.
Makes sense. So one other thing, and I don't know how much you can talk about this because I'm sure you've had and still have discussions about it, but we did an episode a few weeks ago about the event stream issue that came up, where there was some bad stuff. We'll just put it that way in one of the packages. And it's curious because everybody was talking about, okay, so, who's to blame, or maybe a better conversation was, where do we fix this, right? Do we fix it at the community? Do we fix it at NPM? Do we fix it at some other level? And I'm curious, how do you approach, and how does this affect you, you personally, and you NPM as a company, when these kinds of things come along and you have to deal with something that's super unpleasant at the company, right? I mean, nobody was happy about the way that went down, and I don't know if anyone's really happy about any of the solutions that have been proposed either.
Yeah. Security is interesting. I think, and I think particularly the event stream event was a really interesting sort of case study in that. There are a couple of really fascinating takeaways that I think a lot of folks missed. One of them is, and this is kind of like an interesting 2020 hindsight. The developer who did it, right, the person who published the malware, they went to so many lengths to sort of cover up their tracks and cover up their trails and make it impossible for anybody to figure out what it was that they did. That itself was actually kind of a red flag for a lot of folks, right? The thing that made somebody stood up and take notice was like, why is there obfuscated code in this open source project I'm using?
Right.
If they had just not obfuscated it, if they just had it like in a function where the function also does normal stuff and kind of just hid in plain sight, probably would have lasted a lot longer. The other thing that's interesting about it is just the amount of attention and sort of concern that it raised.
Right.
For something that affected, the folks that it affected, I'm not going to say, I don't want to like trivialize the impact that it had on Coinbase and a couple other parties who were being targeted by it, but like it was not damaging a large number of computers or a large number of people, right?
Right.
And I think there's something really fascinating that happens, right? It's the same reason why people are so much more afraid of, like terrorists than car accidents. Even though, like, you are not going to die from a terrorist, your car accidents are way more damaging, right? Like they're way more scary, actually, in like actual numbers. Most of the security vulnerabilities that come to light are not malware. They are, somebody is not properly escaping a string. They're using a regular expression in a way that if you send it some malformed input, it'll crash your server. Like these are things that are like garden variety, just human slip ups.
Yep. And somebody finds them before somebody else exploits them. And so
or not. I mean, right? Like,
I guess that's true.
Or they sit out there for for a long time. And I think the issue that happened with it was Equifax, right? Not Experian.
It was Equifax, yeah.
Equifax, yeah. That was actually a perfect example of security gone wrong. It was not malware. It was not, they didn't download something evil from the open source community. They actually just kept shipping a thing that they didn't realize was out of date for something like 9 months. And somebody who was just kind of scanning the internet for servers advertising what version they were, found one that was vulnerable and then exploited it. And then the exploit happened and nobody had any alerting around it. They didn't actually notice for a really long time. So the attackers got away with, everyone's personal data. Now, that is a much more common story. That's actually a much more common failure mode, right? That's like yeah, we're all afraid of ISIS or whatever, but you're gonna probably just die because you sat down on your couch too long for too many years. Like, this little bit of like active discipline will prevent so much more hazards. And so, that really, I think we don't beat this drum enough, to be completely honest. But that's one of the things that informs how we approach security at NPM and how we, why we rolled NPM audit out to everyone. What we sort of found was like, initially we were thinking of NPM audit just as a paid only feature, and we did some initial reporting and like, okay, well, how many vulnerabilities are people actually installing? Because I sort of had this idea of like, we have this self-image as diligent, competent people who, of course, stay up to date with all of our updates. And we looked at what everyone was actually downloading, and we said, "Oh crap! Like this is bad. We got to help them."
Well, and that's the thing. To your point there, I just NPM install, right? I don't look at what's coming in. I don't. I'll admit it.
How can you?
Right? Yeah, and how can I even begin to look at it and say, okay, this is what I'm bringing in. This is what all these things do. So yeah, and I think that's what scared everybody too, was that everybody does that. It's I'm gonna do Express, so npm install -g Express or whatever, right? And and then you get all of the dependencies and you don't even look at them.
Yeah, you don't need to.
And everything's good.
So so the things like that, I really think there's no point trying to change human nature. The goal of software development should be such that you can be lazy about stuff like that, right? The whole point of a package manager is that I can just npm install Express, and then I get Express and it just works. Like that's actually how it's supposed to work. And so any solution that says, well, okay, what we need to do to prevent the next Express stream or event stream is everybody be super on, heightened alert at all times. It's like, that's not realistic.
No.
The stuff that we actually have planned, and I'm going to make the classic product manager mistake and start talking about the future instead of the present. What we have now with NPM Enterprise and with NPM in the open source community and with orgs is like good ways for people to collaborate in ways that require a lot less sort of moment by moment communication, right? If you're using GitHub to share dependencies with each other, or if you don't have good search and discoverability, you have to go and ping people and say, hey, I pushed an update, it fixed a security problem, hurry up and do it, right? The whole MO and the purpose of NPM is to make that process much more scalable by removing a lot of the explicit human-to-human touch points. So instead what I do is I just publish a version that fixes the problem, and you get it because NPM is telling you, hey, you need this new version, it fixes the security problem. Where we're going is, especially in NPM Enterprise, adding ways for people to have more visibility into what projects um, are being worked on in their enterprise instance, making it easier for them to be aware of security issues. So, for example, if I install something today and I run the check today, and then a vulnerability comes out 2 months later, like, how do I know that happened and that I have to go back and update it if I haven't touched or
Right.
looked at that project in a long time? And I think the level of detail in the data that we have, and the way that we can kind of make a lot of that stuff really visible and seamless is really going to change and change the way that JavaScript is done at a lot of these enterprise companies, in a really significant way, in a way that I think improves the lives of the people who are writing that code.
Right. That makes sense. So what is NPM Enterprise? I know we've talked about this on other shows, but I'm curious what it is and where you're heading with it.
Right. So we actually just released, pushed to GA, our new SaaS-based enterprise system. We had a product a while ago that was on-prem software, and it wasn't as good, so we made it better. The SaaS is you get your own domain name. It integrates with single sign-on. It's a fully isolated single tenant system, and so anything that you publish into it can only be accessed by people who can log into that instance.
Right.
It has support for NPM audit, which is, I believe, still unique among enterprise JavaScript registries. A couple of the others have their own security add-on tools, but I really think that you need to integrate this all the way into the developer experience, all the way down to the actual tools that developers are using. If there's even a slight extra step extra hop that I have to go through in order to run a security scan, I'm just not going to do it, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that's why NPM audit fix will, it'll tell you, like, hey, I found 6 problems you can run NPM audit to fix them. Like, people do. I mean, we see that happening in our logs, in our registry activity. So so that's sort of it in a nutshell. The main value proposition today for NPM Enterprise is that it allows you to more granularly and sort of broadly collaborate between teams at a large company. So if you have 100 developers and the web team needs to pull in packages that are being created by the platform team, then you get kind of the benefits of the NPM experience. Each of them can be in their own separate orgs with their own package names and everything, and sort of manage their own workflows, and then collaborate between teams in a way that's very efficient and scalable.
Right. That's really interesting. So if I guess if people feel like they're kind of on the edge of needing something like this, how do they determine, okay, we should really give Enterprise a look?
Well, I think the best rule of thumb is, if you're like 20 developers or less, and you're working in probably like a single team. I think the average team size for orgs is around 6 or 7. At that size, our orgs product is probably fine. It doesn't have support for single sign-on. You don't get your own dedicated domain name, but it's easy. You just create NPM accounts and add people to teams and stuff.
Yep.
Beyond that, when you get up towards the like 20 to 50 to 100 developer level, NPM Enterprise is a really good fit for what we've seen. Like I said, currently the best value sort of value proposition most directly appeals to people who are like managers of engineering managers. Sort of if you're at a company big enough where that's a job that you have, it's not just all the engineers report to the CTO, then NPM Enterprise is a really good fit, because now you have people who can't schedule a meeting to tell somebody that they updated a new version of a package.
Right.
We've talked to customers and prospects and stuff, and people at companies where, like, literally the way that they share code at their company is Slack. Like, they go post in Slack whenever they push a new version into their repository, and the way that you find what's available is you search in Slack, and it is.
Oh man,
it's like it's
that's terrible.
banging rocks together. I mean, it's so dark ages. Or the somewhat that's actually a pretty advanced approach. Much more common is they have an internal wiki, and you have to know to update it when you update a package. They use like how do you search for packages? Like Command F. Like it's pretty rough. And when you get into large companies with hundreds or thousands of packages, that's just really tedious and awful. A lot of the repository management systems out there, I'm not opposed to binary artifact repositories, but they really are just repositories of binary artifacts, and they don't have the level of search and discovery and team management capabilities that NPM does. And that's why we use NPM rather than a giant FTP server that everybody just uploads stuff to. Like, you actually want to see the README files. You want to be able to search based on keywords, or look at who the developer is that manages a thing, and have some sense of like, is this somebody whose code you've used in the past and you liked it, right? Or are they a bozo who's difficult to work with? So we have some of those in open source, as I'm sure you're aware.
But no, that never happens.
I feel like I've been that bozo enough times that I can.
I
don't feel like I'm punching down. So
enough of us have been. So yeah.
So that's and that's kind of the in essence, like NPM Enterprise is an NPM that's for one customer, that's for one company.
Right. Awesome. So what are you working on now? I mean, we've talked about a lot of things, some of which you are working on now, but yeah, what are kind of the big pieces that you're looking at these days?
The biggest thing I'm looking at right now is with my VP of product, we need to hire product managers. We had a PM who moved on to another role at Google. He'd been with the company for about 5 years, one of our first employees, and
right.
It was definitely just sort of a time for a change in his career. So no hard feelings or anything, but so that's actually left us where, like, I hired a VP of product, and I knew that we needed to hire another product manager, and then one left. So I'm like, okay, well, we're starting more or less from ground zero on this org. And so it's a lot of really interesting but also very challenging kind of org design questions, and then also just sort of in the sort of 6 to 18 months time frame, like, where do I want this company to be in terms of our product portfolio, in terms of our partnerships, and ways that we're going to have a really meaningful impact on the JavaScript community.
Right. Cool. And is there a place that people can kind of follow up on that stuff, or see what your thoughts are and what you're working on?
I should probably document my thoughts on what I'm working on a little bit more. The moment-to-moment feed is probably twitter.com/IZS, like Igloo Zulu Sierra. Otherwise just npmjs.com, I mean, is the place to look for what's going on at NPM. We've also got the NPMJS Twitter account. We've got a Facebook page. We've got a LinkedIn page. We've got all the things.
Nice. And I think I saw something about you guys hiring. You mentioned hiring project managers, but are you hiring other positions as well?
So right now, I believe we have an opening for product management, for design. You can go to npmjs.com/jobs. And what do we got? Software engineer platform, senior SRE, sales solution architect, biz dev manager, product manager. We're hiring in a bunch of different areas, and I suspect we will be for the foreseeable future. We've grown in the last couple months from like 35 people up to about 60, and we still have another couple of open recs. So it's definitely like a little bit of a growth mode for the company right now.
Right. Very cool. And yeah, I also know that you've hired some people. A lot of the folks that you've hired are not in. Where are you based out of? Oakland?
Yeah, we're based out of Oakland, but we're a very distributed team. I believe our furthest folks right now, we've got some people in South America, in Europe, scattered across the U.S., two, I believe, in Halifax, Canada.
Oh, wow.
One who's kind of a digital nomad and bounces around mostly Mexico. So yeah, but I think here in Oakland, we probably have more people than any other place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're generally pretty remote friendly. Though we do have a little bit of a center of gravity here.
Cool. Well, anything else that we should dive into here, or anything else that you've been thinking about or working on? It doesn't necessarily even have to relate to NPM.
I talked about test frameworks probably more than I should have. So
no, it's good. We need to get you on JavaScript Jabber to talk about it some more.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let me finish it up. It'll probably be about another month or so before I'm actually able to publish it. Like I said, I only work nights and weekends on it, and got some other demands on my time.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, there's something interesting that happens when you have a startup and a kid and a life. Like it's you don't have a lot of hobbies.
Yeah, I know how that goes too. Yeah, I have 5 kids, and the whole startup thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 5 is wow. That's hats off to you, dude.
At a certain point, though, they become your slaves, or they help you with the other kids.
So they're starting to clump together. Yeah, I have one, and we're gonna stop there.
Teach their own.
Yep.
Good deal. All right. Well, I guess before we go to picks, if people want to follow you online, you mentioned Twitter already. Mm-hmm. Are there other places where people can look and see what you're doing?
I'm Isaac's on GitHub and on NPM. Twitter, IZS. Those are probably the main places. My website's blog.izs.me, but I don't write I don't write long form as much as I probably should.
Okay. Cool. Well, do you have some picks? Some things you want to shout out about on the show?
Let's see. What have I been doing lately? Some picks. One pick that is kind of tech and JavaScript jabbery related. I've been really enjoying using something called Ink lately. It's a platform that lets you use React to write command line apps.
Oh, cool.
So it basically takes like a React app and instead of mounting it in a web browser DOM, it mounts it in ANSI codes and the CLI. So the new version of TAP is going to use Ink for its reporting, and it's pretty fancy. It's fun.
I need to get that on the React podcast.
Definitely check it out. In the less JavaScripty world, I've been watching Umbrella Academy. It's a really good show about stuff going horribly wrong. Yeah, it's basically like, what if X-Men, but real life, and wouldn't that be terrible? And the answer is yes, it would be terrible. It's very dark. It's not for children. And the third thing, there's an iOS game I've been playing quite a bit lately called I Love Hue, like the color. And it's a tile sorting game where, well, if you look at it on the App Store, you'll see it's extremely soothing if you're into taking a disordered pile of colored tiles and putting them in color order. It's incredibly intoxicating.
Sounds interesting. Cool.
How about you? Anything I should check out?
Yeah, I'm going to throw in a few picks here. So I just got back from a conference called PodFest. This is not a technical conference. It is a podcasting conference. It was held in Orlando this last weekend, and boy, it was just a terrific experience. I met so many terrific people. I think I went to one session, and it was because my friend was giving it, and he basically said I had to be there. So, but yeah, just talking to all of the sponsors, vendors, talking to just people around the conference. I've got a ton of ideas for some great stuff, and I am just really excited about some of the possibilities that are out there for podcasting and for, outreach and things like that. So I'm excited for that. On the way down and on the way back, I did get a catch up on a few shows. I kind of tend to binge watch just because I get busy. You kind of get how this is, where you're running a company and trying to take care of kids and, do the family stuff. And then also anything else that's out there, I don't know what the rest of your life looks like, but mine includes a church, and I'm involved in scouting, and I'm on the board of my kid's school, and, and so I don't have time to watch a ton of TV. And so when I'm on an airplane, sometimes I do that instead of working. So, The Expanse, season 3 is up on Amazon Prime, and apparently Sci-Fi canceled it, and then Amazon picked it up.
Yeah, I was really thrilled to see that Amazon did pick it up. I haven't watched the 3rd season yet, but it's certainly on my list.
It was pretty darn good. They did a really good job with it, so I'm going to recommend that. And what's funny is I watched the first 2 seasons on Amazon Prime, and so I went and looked for, okay, when is Sci-Fi releasing the 3rd season, and that's how I found that out. So, but yeah, so I was sad they canceled it, but I'm glad that Amazon saved it, and we're seeing that more and more, I think, with some of these shows. So, so I'm going to pick that. The other show that I'm going to pick is The Travelers, I think it's just Travelers. It's on Netflix. It's a Netflix original. And it's like 10 episodes per season, and I'm not all the way through the last season they've released, which is also season 3. But the premise is that there are a series of calamities that humanity is like not great in the future. So there's this artificial intelligence called the Director that sends people back in time, sends their consciousness back in time right before a person dies. Right, so they're not killing anyone who wouldn't have already died, and then these people basically are trying to change the future, and so they succeed in changing the future, but it has other ramifications in the present. So anyway, it's a fun show and really interesting, and I've enjoyed that, so I'm going to pick that as well. And then I'm also getting into Firebase these days, so. Been playing with that, and so I'm going to pick that as well. The last thing that I'm going to pick, I know I'm full of picks, lots of picks. I started up my blog, my personal blog again, and this isn't a place where it's kind of where I blog about all the stuff that doesn't relate to programming or freelancing or business or things like that, because I put all that stuff on devchat.tv. I'm going to start blogging over there again too, but so this is like personal journaling kind of stuff, or if I want to post about, something political or, religious, spiritual, or things like that, don't fall under stuff that, devchat's about. But I'm using Eleventy, which is a static site generator, and I really like it. And I've been posting that to Netlify, and I'm really happy about that too. So I'm going to pick those.
Cool. One other thing I forgot, actually. There's a podcast I wanted to pick called Due by Friday, like D-O by Friday, not that something is due by Friday. And it's, I don't know if you were ever a fan of You Look Nice Today back in the day. It's sort of the like spiritual successor to that in some ways. I feel like it's run by Max Temkin and Alex Cox and Merlin Mann. Max Temkin and Alex Cox both work for Cards Against Humanity. Max Temkin, I think, is the CEO there. And Merlin Mann is Merlin Mann from the internet.
Right.
And the conceit of the show is every week they do a challenge and then come on the show and talk about it. But it's hilarious.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. That sounds fun.
It's one of those I recommend actually starting from the beginning. Like there is some like current event stuff that's a little bit less timeless, but yeah, or just go back a few episodes so at least you kind of have some context for their in jokes.
Right, that makes sense. I guess I'll throw another one into something I discovered at Podfest. They had a table for like, I can't remember what they called it, but it's like the association for audio dramas. And audio dramas are programs sort of like the old time radio programs where they, before TV was invented. And right. So it's narrative along with voice acting and sound effects. And I've been listening to one called We're Alive. You can find it at we'realive.com. And it's basically zombie apocalypse. And it's been kind of fun to listen to. It's a different flavor from your typical audiobook or podcast. So.
Cool.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So I have another interview in 5 minutes. But thanks for coming, Isaac.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great to catch up, and good luck with everything going forward.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, we'll wrap up, and we will catch you all in a week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.